Good evening, everybody. It's so wonderful to see a full house here with us today. I want to encourage you. Well done for coming out this morning. Just give yourselves a round of applause. I think it's worth celebrating. When we gather together in the name of the Lord, He does encounter us as we have just encountered Him through the worship. And I want to commend our music team and the ladies that have been leading us so beautifully this morning. It's wonderful to be a part of a church that's got gifts and talents, but it's not being held back for ourselves, but actually willing and at every opportunity seeking out to serve and to give and to actually bless others. And so this morning we are continuing this journey through the life of Joseph and looking at this topic or theme called living the dream. And I don't know where you find yourself in your journey and what you've experienced in your life, but today I'm going to be talking to us about how do we trust God in the in-between. In between from I've received the dream and as we've looked at, God gives us a dream. We've also looked at how do you and I keep the dream alive even in the midst of disappointments. We've also looked at the fact that this dream, by the way, is not just for you or for me, or it's not just our dream, but actually God has got a much bigger dream. And if He's given us a specific dream for our lives and a purpose and a plan, it always fits into His dream and purpose. And today we're going to be looking at how do you and I persevere and pursue God through the in-between. And we're looking at the life of Joseph, and he finds himself in a dark place. And I must be honest, I'm sure he was asking himself, what is this all for? I thought I had all this promise and opportunity, but at every turn I'm being disappointed, and now actually I'm finding myself hidden away. My dream said that I would be brought forward, but now it feels like at every turn I'm just being brought backwards and further away from that. I want you and I to see that God, even though we may feel like we're stuck, and Joseph maybe felt like he was stuck, but in the in-between, God is at work. And we'll also be looking at the fact that not only is Joseph a great example for us, but actually Jesus shows us how you and I can live and be faithful in the in-between. I want you to understand that in the waiting, God is working. In the waiting, God is working. Charles Spurgeon said the following. He said, God works in the in-between. He is not absent during the waiting, but instead, He is preparing you for His promise. And that's really the starting point for my message today, is that you and I would understand that even though it feels like He's not working, and even though it feels like things have stalled and things are not moving in the direction we would want to, that God is actually preparing us. He's always working at us. He's always preparing us. He's always shaping us. He's always moving things into place so that by the time we get to where we really need to be and the moments of truth, in a sense, and we'll be looking at that pretty soon, where we begin to realize, this is what this was all for. When we can see how God has worked it all for the good because we're becoming more like Jesus, we're expanding His kingdom, we're walking in His presence and power, we'll be able to have that epiphany moment as Joseph had. And so I'd love for us to turn in our Bibles to Genesis chapter 40, and I'm going to read from verse 1 to 23. It's a bit of a longer passage, but I felt it would be helpful for us to understand something of the narrative. It says, sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in the custody of the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody, and one night they both dreamed. The cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of the master's house, "Why are your faces so downcast today?" They said to him, "We have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." Then Joseph said to him, "This is its interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly, when you were his cupbearer. Only remember me when it is well with you, and please do not do me this kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that should put me into this pit." When the chief baker saw the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, "I also had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head." And Joseph answered him and said, "This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh from you. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but he forgot about him." Isn't that just the story of our lives? Isn't that just sort of what we all go through? You know, we find ourselves in the in-between. I love this story. It's just an analogy of just seeing Joseph. He's stuck. He can't go anywhere, but yet he seems to have his eyes and ears open to some of the things that God may want to reveal. And it's amazing for me to see, as I'm hoping to unpack for us, just some of the significant moments and opportunities that came Joseph's way, and how he leveraged or used that, not for his own benefit, but actually for the benefit of others. So often in the in-between, God actually calls us to not be working on our dreams, but actually to be working on other people's dreams. And it's when we are faithful with what God has entrusted to us, at the right time, God will lift us up. That's His promise. And so often, I think we're so enamored and so consumed with the finish line that we forget about running the race that's been marked out before us. And so the first thing I want to share with us is looking at the faithfulness of Joseph in the face of injustice. And this is really the key. If you and I want to live the dream God has for us, we've got to learn to be faithful in the face of injustice. It says that, it begins to talk about that Joseph had been confined for some time. You know, he'd been there for a while. So often we look at these stories in the Bible and we turn the page and we think it's like and the next day. But actually it's like 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 or 40 years that go by. And so many times when you listen and you read a story, someone will say, they'll tell a story of this and this happened, and then it says, in the meantime. Then it was like the next thing happened in the story. And that phrase, in the meantime, I sometimes have come to almost embrace it as in the mean time. This time is mean, Lord. This is being mean to me. And what do you mean with me going through all of the things I'm going through? This is not fair. But so often, friends, we abdicate. We lose sight of what God's doing in us as He's preparing for us for what He's going to do through us. And you and I can disengage from the promises of God when we lose sight of the big picture of what He has called us to and what He is actually doing. God is still writing His story. He's still at work in us. And so I love how Joseph, in the midst of the prison, he is still looking out for opportunities to serve, opportunities to be a blessing, opportunities to hold on to God's purpose and plan, because he understood God was at work. Lisa Terkeurst says the following: "You are not forgotten. You are seen. You are loved. And you matter to God even when you feel invisible." Even when you feel invisible, God still loves us. Even when we feel like our outward circumstances are not quite reflecting that which our promises have shown or has alluded to, actually God is at work in us. And that brings me to my second point today, is that you and I need to understand that working on other people's dreams in the in-between, that's what we have to do. That's what we're called to do. We need to be faithful in the face of injustice, but then we need to begin to be aware of what God is doing in other people's lives. Joseph helped others with their dreams, and so God's working out his dream for us while we are working on other people's dreams. It says in Genesis 40 continues, it says, "And he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of the master's house, 'Why are your faces so downcast today?' And they said to him, 'We have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret him.' And Joseph said, 'Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell me your dreams.'" Now it's amazing. Joseph, first of all, he is aware of the people around him. And his response when they tell him about their dreams, he doesn't say, "I also had a dream." Yeah, dreams are just dreams. They just don't come to pass. Whatever you and I may think would be the interpretation, actually we could forget about it. What's even the use of engaging with the dreams God gives us? Because no dreams ever come to pass. I've been stuck here in this pit for so many years. Everyone's forgotten about me. And that's really what we do all the time. But Joseph says, no, he shows tremendous leadership and servanthood, that even in the midst of being confined, being hidden away, he is saying, "Lord, while I'm here, I'm going to use my gifts. I'm going to lean on your faithfulness. I'm going to point people to you, and I'm going to use this opportunity to bring you glory." Matthew chapter 6, verse 6 says, "But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door behind you to pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you," friends. This is the key in the in-between. For Joseph, he doesn't go, "Well, we'll see. Let me see how I can help you. Logically, might be what this dream means." Or actually, there's no way of really knowing what's on God's heart. No, I'm sure he developed a prayer life that was able to engage with God's character and nature, God's purposes and plans. And he was able to draw from that for that situation and also be sustained by it into the next season. I want to encourage you, as you and I contend for and want to walk in and want to step forward into what God has purposed for us as a people, as individuals, because I want to remind you that which God's placed within us is never for ourselves. It's always for the benefit of others. But in that process, can we simply trust in the God that is faithful? So often I have received prophetic words and promises and opportunities, and the first thing I want to do is to go and tell people about it. And as we see in the life of Joseph, that doesn't go really well when you just go blabbing on about things. And I think even in terms of this area of prophecy and us hearing God's voice, sometimes we're so eager to share, and the reason why we're eager to share is because we're just somehow trying to up someone else, just to be one up. "Oh, but the Lord showed me this. Oh, well, shame, He didn't wake you up at 3 a.m, but for me, it's always 3 a.m. The promises that God has for you is just, God's given me this promise that I'm going to preach before thousands, and He only told you about preaching to your family and bringing them to the Lord. Friends, can you and I take the dreams that God gives us, the prophetic promises? My wife and I, God has shown us some things. I remember many, many years ago, she wrote in her journal, she didn't tell anybody, she wrote in her journal that she felt like God was one day going to bring myself and her to a place where we would lead City on Hill Church. Now 10 years ago, gone around. Hey guys, just want to tell you, hey, this Mark, just want to let you know, your time's up, my friend. It's sticking away. I'm just waiting in the wings. I'm just ready to just emerge as the promised one. No, that's not how it works. When God reveals things to us, we keep it in our hearts, and we say, Lord, if that is what you have planned for me, then please work on my heart and my character and my abilities, my nature, that I may be able to honor you. Because ultimately, it's not for me, it's for His glory. I love what John Wesley says. It challenges me so much. The great Methodist reformer, he said this. He says, do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. When you and I position our lives in that place, for Joseph, here's an opportunity to do good, to encourage, to lift up, to serve once again. And if you and I can have that same posture, then I believe God is preparing us for the great things He has for us. We want to serve others because we understand that our dreams may not come to pass in an instant, but they're also not that far away. I love what Corrie ten Boom says. The measure of a life, after all, is not its duration, but its donation. So when you and I have this posture, that Lord, I know you've promised me many things. I know there's a lot of gifts and abilities that I have, but how can I leverage that? How can I use this to make a difference in the people around me? How can I serve those around me? How can I invest in them rather than for myself? And I love how Joseph even then again points not to himself, but to God. God is the only one that can bring interpretations of dreams. At no point does he say, well, I've had some dreams and I understand a few things and I've got this. No, there's a dependency, but there's also a pointing to. And I want to encourage you, and the people that you and I are coming into contact with, can we be encouraging one another towards that end? If you've got a family member or a friend that's struggling with some stuff or maybe has lost their way, can we be those that encourage and point them towards Jesus and a relationship with Him, growing in our knowledge and experience of Him, so that we would ultimately bring God glory? And so I want to share with us just another important aspect, that whenever I've engaged with God's dream, and especially when I want to serve other people, I often want to operate as the world operates, like a tit for tat. I do this, you do this. But God's kingdom is not transactional, but it's unconditional. It's not transactional, it's unconditional. Therefore, saying, as I'm serving, as I'm engaging with those around me, as I'm laying down my life for the sake of others, I don't seek something for my own benefit. But as I'm sure many of us have experienced, there's no greater way to live than to lay down your life for another. There's no greater fulfillment than having to serve and to care for and to give towards those around us. You've heard this phrase, God helps those who help themselves. And some people would say that's in the Bible. Yeah, in Moses 5 verse 25. No, it's not Moses. There isn't a book of Moses. I just want to, those of you that don't know, it's actually not even in the Bible. But we quote it, many people quote it, God helps those who help themselves. Meaning basically, like if we take matters in our own hands, we shouldn't be waiting for God. God's waiting for us to take action. We should be stepping forward and fighting our own battles and trying to organize things. I mean, there's so many examples in the scriptures where people, Jacob was one of them. He tried his best to make things happen for himself and didn't work out so well for him. Every single time we take matters in our own hands, we lose sight of that. And so that phrase, I want to let you know, was never penned in the Bible, but actually comes from Ben Franklin. He wrote an article many years ago, actually in 1757, from his article quoted from this article called Poor Richard's Almanac. And he actually got it from another guy named Algernon Sidney, who wrote something in 1698. And basically that article was entitled Discourses Concerning Government. Like, how does God help those who help themselves come from, like, talking about the government? But that's what we sometimes think. We think that the way we're going to make progress in this world is by taking matters in our own hands. But the gospel is completely opposite to that. The narrative we see in the scriptures is not the same. In Isaiah 25 verse 4, it says, you have been a defense for the helpless. Not those who can help themselves, but he's a defense for the helpless, a defense for the needy in his distress, a refuge from the storm, a shade from the heat. Romans 5 verse 6 says, for while we were still helpless, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. None of us can lay claim to say that we could hold on to and trust in our own ability. And so when we begin to work on the dreams that God has for us, and as we help others along the way, we are never ever doing it in our own strength. We're not grasping for something that is not ours. But at every turn, we look to serve and to care and to love and to lay down our lives for others. Because Proverbs chapter 11 verse 25 says, a generous person will prosper, and whoever refreshes others will themselves be refreshed. That's the kingdom of God. It's not tit for tat, I give and then I get. It says I give, and then whatever I receive is a gift from God. Because in obedience, as many of us have experienced, I'm sure, that is when I have been obedient to give, sometimes even very sacrificially, I've never found myself in lack. And we often think of prosperity as like money in the bank, nice cars, big houses, possessions. Last time I checked, you can't take those things with you. A hearse doesn't go to the cemetery with a trailer. Can't take your possessions with you, your accolades with you. What you can take with you are the people that your life has been impacted by, and the eternal rewards that you and I would walk in. And so Paul writes in Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 to 19, it says, and let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, especially to those of the household of faith. You and I, as we seek God's kingdom and His dream for us, as we lay down our lives to serve others, especially those who are a part of the family of God, then I believe God's blessing and favor will outwork in our lives. Mitch Albon said the following: the way you get meaning into your life is to devote yourselves to loving others. That is how we do that. And that's why for us in our growth track and something of our values as a church, we want you to know God. We want you to find freedom. We want you to come to a place where you discover the purpose and the dream that God has for your life, but then you ultimately make a difference in the world around you. And friends, ultimately, you and I cannot do that in our own strength. We need to align ourselves with Jesus. It's not about us becoming more like City on a Hill or like me or some of the leaders. No, it's about us becoming like Jesus. And that's how so beautiful for me about this passage and narrative of Joseph. He is such a picture of Jesus. He received this beautiful robe, but his robe was stripped from him, covered in blood, and brought forth as saying, he's dead, he's been rejected. But Jesus, his robe was also removed from him, stripped and not dipped in blood, but covered in his own blood, so that he would redeem us. And as we see in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 to 2, it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run this race with endurance that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy which was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus looked beyond his current circumstances. He endured the in-between, that you and I may be able to walk in that beautiful life that he has promised us. And it's amazing for me to see how this narrative actually ties to the cross. I don't know if you ever noticed this. Maybe you have, But for me, certainly as I've been preparing, I felt the Lord was just reminding me again of some of the symbolism and how it points to the redemptive purpose of Christ for us. If we look at the cupbearer, he has this, he really is a symbol of Jesus, who brings forth the wine. The wine is a picture of Jesus' blood. And in 3 days, Jesus' death, sacrifice, but then is resurrected. His blood sets us free, brings life and restoration. And then he is restored to the King, the Father. So for you and I, if we are going to be restored to the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, you and I need to trust not in our own strength, but in the finished work of Jesus' blood being shed for us for the forgiveness of our sins. And it's a beautiful reality that for Joseph, he looks at that and he can see this is how that is that age-old narrative that's being repeated. But the baker, he looks and he's eager. He's like, wow, man, I'm going to get a good report. This guy got a good report. This is going to help me. And what does the baker represent? If he is a baker, the bread really focuses for me. Jesus said that his body was broken for us. His body was broken for us. The wrath of God, the disapproval of the king was poured out completely upon him. He took upon us that which was due to us. But just like the baker, sometimes you and I could have confidence in the flesh, in our flesh, our ability to earn our way back into God's pleasure. You and I should never, ever be fooled. None of us can redeem ourselves outside of accepting the finished work of Jesus on the cross. He was raised up that you and I may have life in him. His blood was shed that you and I may have salvation and restoration before our King. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, we are Christ's, we belong to him, but it's not only in the giving of ourselves that we become, but is it not? But it is only in the giving of ourselves that we become truly free. When we follow Jesus' example, when we submit ourselves to God's purpose and plan, we are united with him in his death, but also in his resurrection. And you and I are able to experience and express all that God has for us. Isn't that a beautiful promise? That you and I have, even in this dream that we are living, the life that we're living, the promises that we're walking out, that God's redemptive purpose is still being revealed. Even in the midst of the in-between for Joseph, God's redemptive purpose and plan was being put on display. Can you and I look at our lives, sometimes the meantime we're going through, saying, Lord, how can you leverage this for your glory? How can this be used to lead others to your embrace? I want to close with this last thought that as we trust God in our in-between seasons, that we would see that he is at work. He is faithful to complete the good work that he started. The faith that is initiated in us, he will see to completion. But I know it's not easy to hold on to that. It's not easy. I've had moments when I'm like, Lord, I just want to remind you that this is taking a bit long now. I thought you had all these beautiful things for me, and I thought this was going to be a little while, but it's a long while now. Can I encourage us to trust in him in the season of the in-between? In the midst of trials and challenges, sometimes even those disappointments. Jesus speaks in Luke, he says, but love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful even as your Father is merciful. I'm like, Lord Jesus, this is hard. Love my enemies. Be kind to those who treat me unjustly. Hold on to your promise in the midst when I look around. I'm still in the pit, Lord. I'm still here. And even the people that I would say, like Joseph did to the cupbearer, just please remember me. And he's like 5 minutes out the door and he's forgotten about him. It's amazing to see how all of us go through the same things, but God's encouragement and truth and power is still at work and available to us. Because you and I need to understand, whatever we give, we will receive. Not as a transaction, but because God is faithful. In Luke chapter 6:38, it continues. It says, "Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you." Now, we often read this in the context of finances, but actually the context here is judging and forgiveness and letting go, and it's more of the condition of the heart than it is the condition of the wallet, eh? And so often we look at our lives and we say, Lord, my condition in the physical isn't really changing, but what God's really at work in is in our hearts. And so even when you have someone in your life that you know has wronged you, even if there are people that God's sending on your way, that boss, that colleague, that client, those children you've got to try and teach and trying to get them to pass their grades, those people you're serving day in and day out, and they are just never ever showing any form of gratitude, seek opportunities to bless them, because God is busy with you in the in-between. Don't forget that God's always with you. He sees us. He sees everything we say, everything we do, everything we're part of. And God doesn't want us to grow weary in doing good. Don't grow weary in the in-between. Don't grow weary in seeking God, in honoring Him with your words and your actions. And so I want to close with us I felt just as a response this morning that we would listen to a new song. It recently was released by Brooke Lichtenwood, a strange surname. But she wrote the following words, and we're going to respond to this. But I want to ask you and I to consider that this would be our response in every circumstance. Blessed are those who run to Him, who place their hope and confidence in Jesus. He won't forsake them. Blessed are those who seek His face, who bend their knee and fix their gaze on Jesus. They won't be shaken. Come on and praise the Lord with me. Sing if you love His name. Come on and lift your voice with me. He's worthy of all our praise. She continues, says, blessed are those who walk with Him, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage with Jesus. They'll see His glory. Blessed are those who die to live, whose joy it is to give it all to Jesus, and for Him only. Jesus, all for your glory. Come on and praise the Lord with me. Sing if you love His name. Come on and lift your voice with me. He's worthy of all our praise. Come on and bring your offering. Sing if you've known His grace. Come on and lift up your holy hands. He's worthy of all our praise. And then the refrain at the end says the following, and this is really what I feel the Lord really wants to help us to respond in every circumstance. Bless God in the sanctuary. Bless God in the fields of plenty. Bless God in the darkest valley. Every chance I get, I bless your name. Bless God when my hands are empty. Bless God with a praise that costs me. Bless God when nobody's watching. Every chance I get, I'll bless your name. Bless God when the weapon's forming. Bless God when the walls are falling. Bless God because He goes before me. Every chance I get, I'll bless your name. Bless God for He holds the victory. Bless God, He's always with me. Bless God for He's always worthy. Every chance I get, I'll bless your name. Every chance I get, I'll bless your name. Friends, I don't know where you find yourself today. Maybe you are like Gareth. I've been in the in-between for a long time, and I'm struggling. Can you and I put our faith in Jesus, our trust and hope in Him? Perhaps you are actually at a place where you feel, I've just got to again lay down my life to God and say, Lord, I want to respond to your goodness and grace. I want to respond to what you have revealed to me and what you are wanting to do in me so that you would be able to do it more effectively through me. And so I want to encourage us, you can just remain seated.